but raising the bar for professional standards in policing. That begins with integrity, accountability, and transparency. We are here today to present findings from an independent study commissioned by the Michigan State Police that found racial and ethnic disparities in the frequency and outcomes of traffic stops conducted by troopers in 2020. Additionally, the Michigan State Police is one of the only police agencies at a local or state level in the nation to proactively conduct an in-depth study like this without being required to do so. Equally important, we will discuss our response, a comprehensive 5-point plan to address the disparities. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce several people who will join me in this presentation. First, joining us virtually, Dr. Scott Wolf, Associate Professor in the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University and the lead author of the study. Next, two of our MSP Bridges to Blue citizen advisors are here with us today. First, Mr. Omar Cuevas, representing the West Michigan area. Next, Mr. Donnell White, representing the Southwest Michigan area. Also joining us are members of the MSP leadership team. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Diener, Chief Deputy Director. Lieutenant Colonel Kyle Bowman, Field Operations Bureau Commander. And Lieutenant Colonel Chris Kalinsky, Field Support Bureau Commander. As background, in 2017, the ACLU asked the department to begin capturing racial and ethnic demographic data in our traffic stops. And we did that. In 2020, we took a closer look at our data and noticed a potential disparity in the number of traffic stops involving African Americans. In September of that year, I shared what we found with the public and committed to bring in an outside expert to conduct an independent analysis of the data. We began posting all our traffic stop data on the transparency and accountability page on our website. In 2021, we brought in Dr. Wolf and a team from Michigan State University to conduct the study. After analyzing data from 2020, the research team found racial and ethnic disparities in the frequency and outcomes of traffic stops conducted by MSP troopers. Dr. Wolf is here to discuss the findings in more detail. But first, on behalf of the entire department, I pledge immediate action to identify and enact solutions. Michiganders deserve unbiased policing, transparency, and accountability from their state police, and that's what they're going to get. Michigan State personnel of all ranks are steadfastly committed to serving everyone with dignity and respect. It's important to note that while this report reveals that disparities do exist, it is not a commentary on the integrity of individual troopers. We need further study to determine the root causes of these disparities. But the need for further study does not change the fact that these findings demand immediate action. After you hear more about the study from Dr. Wolf, I will detail the 5-point plan designed to address the disparities. As part of that plan, we will hire an independent expert to review MSP policies and recommend systemic changes. We will also equip all troopers with body cameras, integrate cultural awareness training into the new Professional Development Bureau, and launch statewide listening and learning engagements with leaders from communities of color. Omar and Donnell are here today because they, along with our community leaders, have agreed to partner with us as we meet with, listen to, and learn from the people most directly affected by these disparities across the state of Michigan. Now, let's welcome Dr. Scott Wolf, lead author of the Michigan State Police Traffic Stop External Benchmarking Study. Dr. Wolf.
Thank you, Colonel Gasper. I want to start by commending MSP and its leadership for looking deeply into their traffic stops to understand whether disparity does exist. Commissioning a study like this is one example of how MSP continues to be a leader in policing in the state of Michigan and across our country. Within our report, we followed best practices in the racial disparity research literature. We used numerous analyses to gain a full understanding of MSP's traffic stop data. Specifically, we conducted a series of benchmark analyses, which involves us comparing the racial distribution of traffic stops to the racial distribution of other sources of data that are unrelated to police activity. This allows us to assess whether, for example, African-American drivers in Michigan are stopped more often than we would expect based on their representation in some other relevant population. And so we started by benchmarking MSP traffic stops against census estimates. Here we found that African-American drivers were more likely to be stopped than we would have expected based on their representation in the population across Michigan. Hispanic and Asian drivers, on the other hand, were significantly less likely to be stopped by MSP troopers than we would have expected. Because census data does a poor job of estimating the actual driving population or the population that's at risk to come to the attention of the police, we moved to another benchmark. This next analysis benchmarked traffic stop data from MSP against traffic crash data, because traffic crash data does a better job of approximating or estimating the actual driving population or the population that's at risk to be pulled over by troopers. Here again, we found that African-American drivers were more likely to be stopped than we would have expected based on their involvement in not at fault crashes across the state. We also used at fault traffic crashes as a data benchmarking strategy because those type of data provide a better estimate of risky driving practices that might come to the attention of the police. With these analyses, we found that African Americans were more likely to be stopped in MSP's districts 1, 2, 3, and 5 than we would have expected based on their involvement in at-fault traffic crashes. However, there was no evidence of such racial disparity in districts 6, 7, and 8. Next, we used what is referred to as the veil of darkness methodology, which is considered by many to be one of the most sophisticated ways to examine racial disparities in traffic stops. This method assumes that it is more difficult for a police officer to determine the race or ethnicity of a driver prior to making a traffic stop when it is dark outside compared to when it is light. So if a larger proportion of minority drivers are stopped by the police during daylight than at night, this would be evidence of racial or ethnic disparity. Using this method and MSP's data, we found that traffic stops conducted during the daylight were more likely to involve an African-American driver than those conducted at night. Importantly, no such disparities were found for other racial or ethnic groups. We also examined whether there was any evidence of disparities in the outcomes drivers receive after they are stopped by an MSP trooper. This analysis showed that African-American and Hispanic drivers were significantly more likely than white drivers to be searched and more likely to be arrested after traffic stops. Overall, our report shows meaningful levels of racial disparity in traffic stops in many areas across MSP's jurisdiction. But it's important to point out that the report also details some areas where racial disparity is not a concern within the agency and its data. When interpreting these findings, whether it's from reading the report or listening to the words that are coming out of my mouth today, it's really important, imperative to understand the difference between disparity and discrimination. Disparity is an observed difference in the proportion of traffic stops involving a specific group of people compared to that group's representation in another source of data. Discrimination, on the other hand, involves a police officer intentionally targeting and stopping a racial or ethnic minority driver solely because of their skin color. In this way, discrimination involves intent, whereas observed disparity cannot speak to whether an officer acted with intent. This report and its findings speak only to the extent of racial or ethnic disparity in MSP's traffic stops. At the same time, the data do show a meaningful level of disparity that deserves more attention. And again, I commend MSP and its leadership for now committing to digging deeper. In addition to the steps that MSP will be taking, my team and I will be continuing our partnership with MSP. First, we'll be conducting and doing a similar report for MSP with the 2021 traffic stop data. Second, we'll be doing a series of more in-depth, rigorous statistical analyses of MSP stop data to more fully understand the level of racial disparities. And then third, and most importantly, We will be doing a rigorous experimental evaluation of MSP's new internal benchmarking data dashboard. This study will be the first of its kind, and it will provide a rich understanding of the disparity in their stop data and whether the agency's efforts are able to mitigate that disparity over time. This will be a groundbreaking study that will not only help MSP moving forward, but will help inform and guide other agencies across the United States that are looking for innovative ways to address racial disparities. After you hear again from Colonel Gasper and our other speakers today, I will be happy to answer any questions you have about the study. The report will be posted on MSP's website. And thank you for your time today. Back to you, Colonel Gasper.
Thank you, Dr. Wolf. We appreciate your meticulous work and your ability to break down this analysis in a clear and transparent way. As I said in my opening remarks, these findings demand immediate action. The people of Michigan deserve unbiased policing, transparency, and accountability. We have already taken meaningful steps towards these goals, but our comprehensive 5-point plan, developed in response to the traffic stop report, lays out aggressive measures to better understand and address disparities. Here are the key components of the plan. We will hire an independent expert to review MSP policies and make recommendations for systemic changes that will address racial disparities. Next, we will launch a statewide listening and an engagement effort in partnership with our Bridges to Blue Citizen Advisory Council. Through this effort, MSP leadership will engage in open and honest conversation with leaders and communities of color to gather outside insight into MSP policies and practices. And most importantly, to find solutions together. Next, we will make more current data available to MSP troopers and enforcement members through an internal dashboard. This includes timely traffic stop data so they can learn about and adjust their own actions. This might sound small, but it is important and stems from the management adage that you can't fix what you don't measure. Next, building on the implicit bias training and cultural awareness and diversity training already in place at MSP, we will ramp up educational opportunities for department members through the creation of the Professional Development Bureau. This new bureau will provide training and development for more than 1,000 enforcement members on familiar topics, as well as new and emerging topics, including mental health, wellness, de-escalation, cultural competency, decision-making, and communication skills. We look forward to continuing education opportunities with current academic partners like the University of Michigan and Michigan State University. And we look forward to exploring new partnerships with colleges such as Wayne County Community College. Finally, we will issue body-worn cameras to all MSP enforcement members who might come in contact with the public. A body-worn camera is a valuable tool for increasing the accountability of the officer, other officers on scene, and the civilians who our members interact with in the performance of their duties. These tools will offer a real-time, unbiased record of what happens anytime an MSP enforcement member interacts with the public. The cameras will also enhance safety for both the officer and the public. The body-worn camera footage can be used in training and monitoring exercises to enhance safety and strengthen the performance of law enforcement officers in the field. Those are the steps currently identified in the 5-point plan. We fully expect that additional steps will be identified coming out of our work with the independent expert and our community engagement effort. Our Bridges to Blue Citizen Advisory Council will be a valued partner as we walk this path. The council was established in September of 2020 to provide outside insight into MSP policies and practices affecting the public and to generate new ideas and solutions to improve community engagement. 2 members of the council have joined us today. First, please welcome Omar Cuevas. Following Omar's comments, Mr. Donnell White will bring his perspective to this conversation. Omar, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Colonel Gasper. Today's release of these findings of this traffic study reaffirms the decision I made when I was approached to join Bridges to Blue. MSP pledged to be transparent and accountable. And the release of this study and its findings demonstrates just that. Now, yes, the findings are sobering, yet they serve and should serve as a baseline as we evaluate the effectiveness of the MSP's 5-point plan. I appreciate Colonel Gasper's and the rest of his leadership team's intentionality in their approach by taking the consideration of this Bridges to Blue Citizens Advisory Council and their initiatives to schedule community conversations with our communities of color as we work collaboratively towards a common goal: unbiased policing and safe and connected communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. Now, Donnell, thank you so much for joining us today.
Gasper, thank you and the leadership team assembled there today, and to my colleague Omar on behalf of our Bridges to Blue Citizens Advisory Council. In 2020, we came together under the guise that we would build, listen, unite, and engage. And I thank the leadership team for being true to that mission of why we came together. This data-driven accountability approach was not at the behest of a consent decree, but as a result of an agency who chose to be the standard bearer for what it means to deliver quality service to all of its citizens. And so before us is the challenge. Now that we have the data to know is to act, we look forward to working with the department to ensure that we're moving aggressively throughout Michigan's communities to hear from the community, to hear the reactions, to hear the solutions. And it's our hope and our mission that the community will join us on this journey to continue to lift the standard, not just of MSP, but of all law enforcement agencies across the state of Michigan. So again, to Colonel Gasper and your team, thank you for allowing us to be a part of this journey. We look forward to continuing to work with you as we begin this journey together to ensure that all citizens in the state of Michigan receive the quality and service that they deserve in the state of Michigan. So again, thank you for your leadership, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much, Donnell.
At this time, we'll open it up for questions. Please use the raise your hand feature to indicate your desire to ask a question. And when you're called on, please unmute, state your name, news organization, and whether your question is for Colonel Joe Gasper or for Dr. Wolf. And again, as a reminder, we ask that you please leave your camera off to limit distractions on our end. And our first question will come from Mike Wilkinson with Bridge.
Hi, Colonel. Thank you for taking the question. I wondered on body cams if this is something that a certain percentage of troopers currently have, or is this a completely new asset that you'll roll out? And I wondered how many you need and if you know what the kind of cost you're talking about.
So currently we have approximately 250 body cams deployed throughout the state. We anticipate by the end of the year that we will be able to deploy the remainder without any unforeseen circumstances. And we'll be deploying somewhere in the vicinity of about 1,600.
Our next question will come from Marty Link.
Hi, this is Marty Link. I'm a reporter for the Traverse City Record Eagle. We're in Region 7. And I wanted to ask Dr. Wolf, I'm hearing from Father Wayne, a priest with the Gaylord Diocese who works with the Hispanic community, about perhaps as long as a decade of disparities in traffic stops. And so I'm just curious as to why that didn't show up in your study.
There we go. I was muted for a minute. Thank you, host. Yeah, thanks for the question, Ms. Link. I don't have a full answer. The main one, though, that's important for this report is we focus on only 1 year of data that has the most reliable tracking of race and ethnicity within the drivers that are stopped by MSP troopers. And so the information you might be asking about is going to be really difficult to kind of look at historically because of the lack of information or lack of data on the race and ethnicity of the driver. So it's restricted to only 2020 at this point.
Our next question will come from Gus Burns with MLive.
Hello, this question, I guess, could be for Lieutenant Gasper or Scott Wolf. We heard a little bit about the disparity that exists that came up through the analysis, but you had said opening up that this was not attributed to any individual trooper integrity issue. But I didn't hear really what the root cause is believed to be. Was there no look at the root cause of this disparity?
So I appreciate that question. The intent of this study was to identify if disparity actually existed. And as Dr. Wolf mentioned, we have additional steps that we intend to take in the study to better understand where the cause of the study. And although we don't know the cause of the disparity now, we're still taking action. And we're taking action with our 5-point plan to make sure that we are out there engaged with listening and having intentional conversations with community leaders, communities of color. We're making sure that our body cams are going to be deployed, making sure that we're providing that additional data for our troopers so that they can learn from their own activity. And then just making sure all around that the training that we're providing the troopers and the enforcement members is the best that they can possibly get.
All right. One thing I might have missed is when is full deployment of the body cameras going to be completed?
We anticipate by the end of the year that we will have our body cams fully deployed.
Thank you.
Our next question is coming from M. Serrano.
Hello, my name is Maria Serrano, a news reporter, News Channel 3 in Kalamazoo. My question is, some may argue why this study was done earlier. Do we have an answer on that? We also know that the ACLU was doing MSP for alleged race profiling. So in the wake of this study, what does MSP have to say here?
Well, we do have a history of partnering with the ACLU. As I mentioned in my remarks, in 2017, we started to capture that the demographics on our traffic stops because of a request from the ACLU. And I think, as we move forward, we look forward to having additional conversations with the ACLU regarding this report. And, we will continue to operationalize our plan and make sure that, we're doing what we can to understand the disparity and reduce it as much as possible.
At this time, I don't see any other hands. Sorry about that. Mike Wilkinson from Bridge again.
Thank you. I figured I'll ask another one if I can. I wanted to ask Mr. White or Mr. Cuevas, who've probably heard it from their own communities, the complaints about driving while Black or driving while Hispanic. If there's any sort of indication that the work of Dr. Wolf and approved what has been a feeling among those populations for a long time.
Mr. Wilkinson, do you mind repeating your question? It was just a little bit unclear.
Okay. I wondered if you, from a number of people in the Hispanic and African American community for years have said there's a penalty for driving while Black, driving while Hispanic. And I wondered if this report done by a researcher from Michigan State is vindication of what people felt. It proves that point.
Well, Yes, indeed. I mean, there have been perspectives from the communities of color, right? What this report does is that it provides some data points that we could use to be able to, in collaboration with MSP, see if this 5-point plan is effective, right? I have full faith in Colonel Gasper leadership team that the intent is to improve the situation and to identify root causes, right? But we have to start somewhere. And part of that is being able to establish a baseline. What's the existing situation that we're living in with some data points that then we can be able to say, let's measure. How did we do in 2020 versus now 2021, 22, et cetera? And far from being just the experience of some, now we're using this traffic study so that we can guide a conversation that can be measurable in the future.
Thank you.
We'll go back to Marty Link for another question. And after Marty asks her question, we'll turn it over to Maria Serrano for our last question.
Yes, hi, this is Marty Link again, Region 7, Traverse City Record Eagle. This question is for Colonel Gasper. Colonel, I was wondering if any of these results will be shared with the Border Patrol and if you anticipate any changes in how Michigan State Police works with the U.S. Border Patrol and Customs Protection.
So this study will be posted on our website. So if the Border Patrol would like to access the report, then they will be able to do that. And in terms of interaction with the Border Patrol, we have a number of partnerships and relationships with federal law enforcement. If you are concerned about immigration, to speak to that specifically, that is another endeavor that we partnered with the ACLU on in 2019 and sat down with them. We actually provided them with our policy for our internal policy for immigration, and they made several recommendations that we actually adopted to make sure that we could bring that order up to where it should be, paying attention to some of those gaps. And as a result of that, we have even created internally with MSP a translation and interpreter program where we now use members of the department to assist other members of the department in translating on traffic stops or investigations or anything of the like, so that we don't have to go outside as much.
Hello, again, Maria Serrano, News Channel 3. I know Michigan State Police, you guys mentioned earlier that the goal of this was to identify if disparity actually existed. And based on this study, answer is yes. So what additional steps are you guys, MS, working on right now to better understand the cause of this disparity and what will happen between now and then when we have? I mean, how are you guys working with your, officials and troops to mitigate this disparity?
Yes, so I think it's important to understand that we're not resting on a reputation, we're building one. And from that standpoint, it's important for us to have a comprehensive 5-point plan like this. It's very important for us to do this together within the department and with the community. And that 5-point plan lays out how conversations within the communities will lead to solution-oriented ideas, innovative ideas on how we can reduce disparity. As we provide additional data to our troopers, they will have much more information to make decisions on how they're conducting traffic policing. The body cams, again, bring great accountability for everyone involved, both troopers, other officers, and citizens, and concentrating on that training too. The partners, the education partners that we have are really important to us. The training that we currently offer and paying attention to emerging tech training such as de-escalation, mental health training, with a keen eye on the implicit bias and cultural competency are all important steps that we'll take to learn more with Michigan State University and be able to understand how to reduce the disparity in the future.
At this time, we have one more question from Reverend Wendell Anthony.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to the Colonel and to all of you. I just want to say that it's very important for the Michigan State Police, any police department, to be transparent and to open itself up for scrutiny, for correction, recommendation, and for solutions. I think that's important. And I want to recognize Colonel Gasper for that. That's different than several of your predecessors who have preceded you in this very important job. The Michigan State Police is the #1 police department in the state of Michigan. It's a department that everybody goes to for investigations, for oversight, for insight, for professionalism from around the state. And so for you to articulate imperfections within your own department is telling and revealing for all of those other law enforcement agencies that follow your leadership and your example in terms of their own departments. And while I commend the 5-point program that you have articulated, particularly that part of education which can refresh, renew, review, and retool troopers in your arsenal and your army, so to speak, I think it's important to broaden that, to go to communities where they are greatly impacted, like Wayne County Community College District in Detroit and others, because as you know, this affects Black and brown people. And I would also say this to you, Colonel, because you're leading a system which is rooted in traditionalism. It has a particular culture that the officers enjoy. It's a culture that has not often embraced every ethnic and every race, and we all know that. We've been saying this for a number of years, and now you in boldness and in strength and power and in confidence have been free enough to acknowledge it. So we acknowledge that. However, I do want to say one final point, and that is it's important to take responsibility for these actions. We know not all state troopers are guilty of these actions, but too many of them are. And so we simply say that having responsibility with no accountability is an exercise in futility, to the degree that there must be accountability for officers who are guilty of misusing their trust and violating their oath and disregarding the professional ethos of the Michigan State Department. And so I would hope that as a part of this, even though we all know everybody ain't gonna like it, but if you violate the rules, you gotta pay a price. And that example has got to be set forward. You have started off on a course that we can support today, and I hope that you stick to the course, stick to your principles, you'll find support there. But I would also say there must be accountability, particularly when you find officers in the department that continuously violate their trust. And no matter what you say or what you implement, they still are guilty of that kind of disrespect and disparity. And while they may not be racist, the consequences of their actions have a great racial disparity. So we support what you're doing. We want you to do it in a real clear way. Thank you for that moment.
Thank you, Reverend, for your comments, and we appreciate your partnership. And just to touch on the accountability piece, I know that I, along with our department, fully support that. When officers violate the public's trust, they do need to be held accountable. And it is currently and has been for a number of years against our policies and procedures to engage in biased policing. And when that is brought to our attention, we thoroughly investigate that, and we do hold our troopers accountable through the disciplinary process when that is discovered. And we will continue to do that throughout the existence of the department and in conjunction with this study. So again, I'd like to thank again the leadership team, our Bridges to Blue members, and the media for joining me today. As a reminder, the full report and summary of the 5-point plan will be available on the MSP website. And this concludes our news conference. Thank you.
Thank you again for your attendance today. A copy of the news release and a link to the report is now available in the meeting chat.